Welcome to episode 84 of the Slip and We podcast. My guest this week is Ryan Songalia, jack of all trades in this sport. Ryan, thank you so much for coming on today.
No worries. Thank you for having me on.
Real quick, just introduce yourself. Let the people know kind of who you are, where you're from, some of the various roles and things that you've gotten to do in the sport of boxing.
My name is Ryan Songalia, of course. I was born in Hoboken, New Jersey, raised in Cliffside Park, grew up everywhere. I think people would most know me from my job at Ring Magazine. I've been a reporter at the Ring Magazine since I want to say 2011. And also at various times a copy editor as well. And that's mostly what I do. I dabble with some amateur boxing coaching on the side too.
Who are some of the guys that you trained? I know I met one of your fighters at the fight at Sony Hall.
Jean-Pierre Valencia, that's one that everyone knows in that West New York area. He is he won the Diamond Gloves at 165 pounds last year, and Peter Roldan, who was the 203 pound open class Diamond Gloves champion last year. It's it's a lot of fun. I have a great time doing it, and I always say, like, especially something that we're like, it's a real passion project. If you're not having fun, you're not doing it right. So for me, it's I look at it like I learned how to box when I was a teenager growing up in Union City, at the Union City Boxing Club. And I realize every day that I wasted all of it. And, I didn't take it for granted. I thought that I had forever to just get everything done, and I didn't have any urgency. And, you know, um so this is sort of my atonement for that, is helping out other people who have a passion for boxing, giving them the perspective that, hey, I was someone who really wasted a lot of potential, and took it all for granted. Now thankfully I kind of rebounded. I found a sweet gig with that Ring Magazine stuff, but assuming that these guys are really just in it to be fighters. The time to move is now. So Valencia, Verdugo de Esmeraldas. He is fighting February 4th in in Pennsylvania. I want Upper Darby, Pennsylvania. Fighting a very talented fighter from what's the term? From Delaware. So yeah, if you're out there at that fight, I think it's Must Fight Boxing Gym. On February 4th, come and support.
What is Jean Pierre's experience level, and what are some of like the tournaments that he's competed in?
So interesting story, like a tremendously interesting story. I was at another gym I used to manage in North Bergen. Reese, like I want to say, like earlier last year, and so he walks in. He doesn't speak a word of English. He's from Ecuador, and he's basically, I can understand though that he wants to box, and I held pads for him. I'm like, oh my goodness, this guy is like tremendously strong, and he looks determined, right? Why else? He had just gotten to this country. He was living in Spain as and working as a truck driver. And then when he got laid off, he figured, hey, I might as well just try my luck in America. And he had boxed over there. He had maybe like 7 fights or so. And he was the open class of that country. It's the threshold is lower. So he comes over, and he's really hungry to box. But I left that gym. So he hits me up on Instagram. Hey, Ryan, by the way, I need a coach. And I'm like, all right, I got you. So, and I was done with boxing. It was a kind of acrimonious split at that gym. I was sort of done with that stuff. And I was like, all right, I'm going to focus on the next thing that's going to kind of get my fancy. So So I left that place, and then I found a place to train Jean Pierre. We're kind of bouncing around gyms at the moment right now, but yeah, that's sort of like the main guy right now. I actually just because my schedule isn't working out with where I need to be in terms of dedication to Peter Roldan, we got him a fight last month, and now he's training with actually my childhood coach, Lucky, over at Ringside Boxing in Jersey City. But yeah, Jean Pierre, we've had 5 fights together. He has won all 5 fights. Won the New Jersey 165-pound Diamond Gloves Championship. And he's become sort of like a neighborhood hero, in that area, because everyone knows him, like, because he's in all the newspapers. In fact, he was telling me a story that he he went to Quick Check over on Bergen Line, and some police officers outside recognized him. Hey, you're that boxer guy, right? And like, and he's like, in his very like limited English, yes, yes, I am. So when he went inside, they bought him his coffee and said, "Listen, you need to go knock that guy out. We saw you in the paper that you're about to fight." So he's like, "Oh, I will do my best." But yeah, I'm very proud of him. He's a great person. He literally just came to America, I want to say in June or July. By August, I was training him. By September, he had already fought. And like, he hit the ground running in his new country. So very proud of him. And then March, April, we're doing the Golden Gloves tournament. So it'll be a nice opportunity to kind of get his name out there a little bit further as well.
This might be a stupid question, but what is kind of the status of Ring Magazine? It's something I grew up with, heavy, heavy, heavy. And for whatever reason, people seem to think that it's either not being printed or it's not around or whatever. There may be some confusion around that.
Yeah, so we did print our last print edition already. That's the one with Jack Dempsey on the cover. Changing times. Yeah, I remember as a kid, like, I always wanted to work for Ring Magazine because I remember as a kid buying Ring Magazine. That's not the way that people really digest information anymore. Um, I can tell you from my personal experience, I never like to wait, all those like weeks to get my story. I need an instant gratification of online publication. Even when I worked for newspapers, I used to work for the New York Daily News. It would kill me to have to wait to the next day, because I'm like, oh, it's a fire story. What are you talking about? They need to hear that now. But yeah, that was a real issue. I think just the times are changing. Now there will be an online version of the magazine that is published. That's something that we had done before as well. So same great writers, same great content for those who want it. But this is the green version. The green version is the online version. All right, we're going green.
Nah, I like that. I'm glad to know that because I was a subscriber for, it had to be at least 10 years, at least, you know what I'm saying? And so when I had heard that it wasn't being printed, I was like, well, what does that mean?
Mm. Well, that's the thing, like I never subscribed. I don't think I've ever subscribed to a magazine. That's a level of commitment that scares me. But I was always a guy who like I'm talking about, like I would go into I used to buy whenever I had money, I would buy every single boxing magazine. So I was really a big fan of KO magazine. Of course, that was part of like the Ring Magazine merger. I loved KO, the Ring. Like my favorite actually was Jeff Ryan, the Ryan Out Loud column when I was a kid. And it was actually pretty funny because I got to like meet a lot of the guys who were from the previous generation of Ring Magazine, that I used to read as a kid. And not actually when I was in Philadelphia to cover Jerron Ennis's media workout. I got to chop it up a bit with Nigel Collins. So yeah, that's one of the cool things is that, like, I went from like reading their work as a kid, to working alongside them.
I just figured I would show you this, right? Because I knew you were a writer for The Ring, and so I have them in my apartment, whatever. But this was the first issue that I ever got. Um,
There we go. That
I
was
don't know
all
if you,
February 2006.
yeah, it's the Castillo Corrales 3 issue, and I remember it was like my Christmas gift that year was that I got a Ring magazine subscription.
Well, let me tell you something. Actually, that it's so funny that you pulled up that one. My first ever story when I was trying to figure out, because I learned how to write. I mean, I really started writing just in for boxing forums. I was, people who know me back then, I was like a forum troll. And the first story I ever got published was for East Side Boxing. I don't know if you remember them. It was like one of these like smaller sites. But it was about that fight. It was like a preview of that fight. And yeah, I think they're called Boxing 24 now or something like that. I don't know.
So obviously this past weekend, Tank Davis stops Hector Luis Garcia. What are your initial takes of his performance and of the fight as a whole?
I thought that was a very good performance because sometimes my criticism of Tank Davis is that he waits for the fight to come to him. He doesn't go out there and make the fight. And this was a case where he walked the guy down, wasn't overly active, but he made his opportunities. And I thought that that showed some real growth in him. Still not as busy as I'd like him to be. I don't think does enough to set up his offense sometimes. Sometimes he can be, a bit on the lazy side, but not in this fight. He actually performed pretty well. And one thing you got to take a look at. Look at everywhere he fights. DC, Brooklyn, doesn't matter where. It seems that he is just a draw. He is a star. And I know that term is tossed around a lot, but he is a star. He is a guy who he gets on a bill and he has this sort of energy and vibe that people want to support and want to see him fight. I mean, I think a lot of us found out that Meek Mill was ringside, because of him trying to get beat up by one of the Russell brothers. But yeah, no, that's the kind of energy he draws. He draws like a lot of those like celebrities, and like so it's one of the because someone's gonna get knocked out. It's almost in a weird way, it's a sort of Mike Tyson vibe, because people tune in because they knew someone was gonna get knocked out. I don't want to say that Tank Davis has Mike Tyson energy or vibes, but certainly not in this style. But he, at any moment something can happen, and that's what people want to see in boxing. They want to know that anything can happen.
Well, and there's definitely multiple similarities to draw between Tank and Tyson. I thought, like you said, he kind of lets the fight come to him, and I think for a lot of the opponents he's fought, Garcia being one of them, I think this happened in the Leo Santa Cruz fight too. Like other guys will start letting their hands go and they're landing, so they start getting too comfortable in the pocket, and then once they start staying in the pocket too long, that's when Tank starts letting his hands go and landing power shots, and that's usually when he knocks guys out. I just wonder, like, at what point do you run into a guy where you can't give him 4 rounds at the start? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's someone who has a little bit more discipline. Like, remember how like when Bivol fought Canelo, he sort of didn't fall into the traps that a lot of Canelo opponents did, and Canelo was sort of frustrated. I think that when that happens, when he gets into a fight with someone who is going to stay the course, stick to a game plan, and box from the outside, it's going to be a problem. But yeah, no, I think that he didn't do that this fight. He kind of pressured a bit. I think also what played into it was he allowed Tank Davis to sorry, he allowed Garcia to kind of move his hands a bit, and that wore him down. Like Tank's a guy that I imagine if he was an amateur boxer, in a 3-round fight, if he fought the same way that he did now, he'd be 0-1,000, But when it gets to like a professional fight and it doesn't matter what the scores are if you don't get to the 12-round distance, yeah, that's a guy who can punch. He's always had great ability. I don't think that his level of opposition has been up to where it should be in terms of like justify. Like it seems sometimes like he's more of an attraction than he is a champion, right? Because he has
I
had
think that's
one
a
of
great
these.
way of putting it. I've never heard anybody put it like that, but that's really good.
Because like he has a secondary belt, and he doesn't really
Yeah.
fight in the champions, but he fights the guys that people want to see, sort of, right? So Raleigh Romero, for whatever he was a guy who got a lot of attention because he had a personality. Um, Ryan Garcia, I think, is would fall into that category. Ryan's not a champion; he's an attraction, though. So that's someone like it doesn't matter how you can put 1,000 belts on a guy if no one knows him, no one cares about them. It doesn't matter, right? So um, there he's gotten the right opponents to sort of make that noise. Even though if you look at it, like really, like he hasn't gone out there chasing the champions, chasing the stars. you know he's but he's got that it factor that people want to see him fight. So um, maybe you gotta say he's doing the right thing for himself.
And hopefully he does fight Ryan Garcia next. I think that was a good point you made. Just that I think he's more interested in taking fights that either casual boxing fans or people outside of boxing are interested in seeing. Whereas it's really fight fans that are going to call for a fight with Lomachenko or with Devin Haney
Yeah.
or with some of the other kind of top and more technical guys at 135.
Well, someone put it to me this way. It's like when we talk about like what are the fights that people really want to see? Because when everyone's like in boxing, on boxing Twitter, people are like, "Oh, we want to see Spence Crawford," and then the casual sports fans like, "Who is Spence Crawford? I don't know Spence Crawford. I never met him."
Yeah, it's true. A lot of the what would be the biggest fights in general sports is different than what would be the biggest fights for fight fans. I just wish they'd make some more of those fights.
Yeah, it would be nice,
That'd be nice
but
if we could get some bangers now and then, because it's really a lot of these cards are pretty soft lately.
yeah, I would agree. It seems like there's like usually one like on a card. Say there's like a stacked 12 fight card, right? It's like a PBC card. Because they do pretty good undercards also. You'll see almost every fight is an A side, B side fight, but like maybe one or two fights are like, okay, I want to see that because I want to see what happens here. A lot of the fights, I wouldn't even say like the matchups are like, oh, this is gonna be exciting. This is gonna be Gotti Ward. This is gonna be special. It's like I want to see what happens, kind of like how it felt with like Oscar De La Hoya versus Bernard Hopkins. I knew the fight was gonna be, what it was, but I wanted to see it happen anyways, right? Um, but in terms of like good matchmaking, when we get great fights, it usually turns out to be an accident. Like someone upset the matchmaking there. Because that's why I say, like, boxing is a hard sport to bet on because the matchmakers, I know a lot of the top matchmakers, these are brilliant boxing minds. They don't usually miss. So when something happens, that's out of the ordinary, it's usually an accident. They say you're supposed to fight the fights. That's why you fight the fights, but these fights have been fought on paper. These fights have been fought in like you know, in a production meeting where it's like, what's a fight where we can get our guy a win, but it's a test. So yeah, that's the thing about with regards to boxing is like someone who really knows the sport, you can look at a bout sheet and guess like most of those, almost all of them, and usually because that it's the person who's on the left side of the page.
Yeah, that's true. There's literal visual indicators of who you should be paying attention to, even if it's just that there's a poster and the poster only has one guy on
Yeah, or like he's everyone in the blue corner is winning for some reason.
it. Right. How do you obviously everyone's talking about it. How do you see a fight between Tank and Ryan Garcia playing out?
It's tough. Actually, I was talking to my little brother about this. Because he made a great point. It's like Tank, he does get caught, right? And the one thing that Garcia does that no one can take away from him, he knows how to land that counter left hook from distance, right? Like it's like a whip. It's just instant. A lot of the things he does is not really pretty. Ryan Garcia, he sometimes can be uncoordinated, but when
He
he
keeps that
gets,
chin up in the air too.
that's a big issue. We saw Luke Campbell, for instance, take advantage of that. If he, but the problem is with Tank and Ryan Garcia is that Tank will, have the patience to wait it out. He's not going to take the chances, And if Ryan Garcia is waiting around all night, he's going to start to, force it a little bit, and then, that could be a problem. But I think that Ryan Garcia has a lot of the attributes because Ryan Garcia is a guy who has a lot of detractors, and people don't know really, what his level of dedication is, for instance, what his level of ambition is. He's a guy who's become a star before he really did anything, and but the reason why is because he has something there. He is a puncher as well, and there's almost this expectation that, oh, well, if someone is talking like this, he must be destined for greatness, and sometimes people are just talkers. Sometimes, like Wally Romero, but Ryan Garcia, I think there's substance. I think that we're going to find out there is a lot more substance than just the talk. I'm not saying he's going to necessarily win, but Tank Davis is in a real fight there, but it's also a very lucrative fight, and it's an opportunity that I think a lot of people in those weight classes would love to have been in, to fight Ryan Garcia. So I think it's a great fight for the sport. I want to see that fight actually announced. You know what I mean? It's like there's so many moving parts to the
Yeah,
sport.
I want to see it on Box Track. I want to see it.
Yeah, yeah. I want to see it on box track. I want to see it in the ring. I want to see it the weigh-in. Right? That's one of those situations. So, um, you know, it's a big step up for Ryan Garcia, but
It's
this
honestly a big step up for both of them. I feel like it's by far the most significant fight either of them will have had, and I wonder, I think stylistically it's a tough matchup for Ryan because again, he's a super aggressive guy. He's not necessarily like a follow a game plan guy. He's an aggressive guy. He's a genuinely big puncher. You know what I'm saying? And he's explosive, but he's not like a work behind the jab, or he's not there. It's a little more free form than that. And I think that he's a guy that is going to hit Tank a couple of times, and then like a lot of guys, he's going to go, all right, I'm gonna go get this kid now, and that's when he's going to get caught. And I think because they're both big punchers, I lean towards Tank because we've seen Ryan go down, and I can't remember seeing Tank ever even buzzed.
Mm,
Um, so
yeah.
to me, it just seems like unless Ryan kind of is able to progress as a fighter a little bit from his last couple matchups, it just seems like he's gonna walk into something.
Yeah, yeah. No, and I think you're right too. I think that's what that would be my bet if I had like one poker chip and I had to place it somewhere, it would be on that. But it's hard to say still, because maybe this is the matchup that'll get him there to like, to level up because fighters, they tend to rise or fall to the level of their competition. But I'm glad because I think that's a big fight for the sport. But it's like one of those things. It's like, you know, I don't even know how to explain it. It's like Tank Davis is a championship level fighter, right? He just hasn't been fighting championship, he hasn't been fighting the champions. But um, when you get these two people that people actually know, I think that is what, like, it's weird in a weird way because I don't count this fight as like a championship fight, but someone pointed out on Twitter this might be the biggest non-championship fight since Bo Holyfield 3. So
It's like the Publix champion in a sense,
yeah, like I don't think the public,
or at
knows.
least the American public.
Yeah, but I don't think there's a whole lot of publics that know, Devin Haney more than they know Tank Davis. So it's like, in their mind, they can't tell the difference between like, all 12 of like the WBA titles, So to them, this might be something real, but it's a real fight. And between two people that are known, and I don't care like how many belts you have. If no one knows you, it doesn't matter.
How'd you feel about Boots, man? I know a lot of people have been a little bit hard on him after the Karen Chukajin fight. How'd you feel about his performance?
this was exactly what Boots needed. Like, if Boots went out there and knocked out the guy in the first round, I would have been like, wow, this is a waste. And I think that Boots did certain things, like he was working on stuff. I felt like in there, he was never really in danger. He got hit a few times, and Boots is a guy that even though he is a quick guy and he boxes pretty fundamentally well, he can be hit, right? So no surprises there. Maybe go to the body a little bit, more early in the fight, cut the ring down. A couple of things that he could have done, but he needed this kind of fight where a guy was going to stick around and go 12 with him. He won every round. But I don't like it when a guy just knocks everyone out in the first round. To me, that's stunting your development. I've seen fighters like that, and then usually what by the time,
Orlando.
yeah, Berlanga was a guy like that. Because you could do all the rounds in the gym and everything like that, but until it's real in the fight, it's not the same. It doesn't matter. Berlanga, I think the only guy who really was like that and then turned out to be pretty okay was, maybe Edwin Valero or because I mean Tyron Brunson,
I mean,
he was a guy.
Tank would be a great example as well.
Yeah, Tank, so yeah, I think that Boots needed this. This is exactly what Boots needed. And you know what? If that gets the other champions, like Spence and Crawford to say, oh wow, he's a vulnerable guy. He's not Superman.
Yeah.
You'll fight him even better because that just shows how high the bar was set for Boots Ennis because Boots was another guy who passed the eye test, but he hasn't really gotten to actually take the test. So, and I know that we in the boxing public there's this tendency to prematurely like anoint someone as like a star or as like a next whatever, but there hasn't been a fighter more than Boots that I've said, oh, this guy, just the eye test alone, like yes, I'm buying stock in Boots Ennis.
So I think when a fight like this happens, because he's such a super talent, right? So he's been walking through not top guys, but quality guys like Lipinets and Custio Clayton, and these are good fighters. Um, he's been walking through these guys, easy work, no problem. And then he runs into this guy that, no disrespect to him, most fans have never heard of. I had never heard of him. And, people like rely on, things that we do for us to know that kind of shit. And I certainly didn't know who he was. So then he's going 12 rounds. And I think by the time that fight's over, I'm trying to figure out how much of it is just that the opponent is way better than expected, tricky guy, good on his feet, has some slick things that he does, and then how much of it is, Boots had an off night or Boots, I never lean into the like, oh, he's not what we thought immediately. I don't think it's that, but I'm wondering how much of it is like an off night or just the opponent being more than he expected.
This is the one thing. This is like, because like when I operate in a lot of the gyms, I've been around a long time, working like, writing and, covering, boxers in the gyms, training fighters. That was the one guy, Boots Ennis, that everyone's like, listen, that's different. That's different kind of like good fighters go there and get beat up, right? So, like top prospects, guys that you think would be top prospects get beat up by Boots Ennis in the gym. So, I know he's for real, right? But doing it in a fight is different. The one thing that I think that just learning like the little things about being a professional, setting up that body work early on, making sure that that guy doesn't have it in the gas tank later on. I think that cutting the ring down because he's so used to just going out there, taking a couple swings and going home. I
And
think,
usually if he lands clean, the guy goes down.
yeah, and then the fight's usually over from there. Because he's a tremendous puncher in addition to being, a pretty solid boxer as well. And he's got some speed and he does a whole lot of different things. And he's just, and he's very hungry, right? Like this is a person who I know he said that, right after the fight, he's going to be back in the gym. I believe that he probably worked out today, and I believe that his sparring is probably going to be not too far off, in the next few days. So I'm not concerned. I think that just shows that, in boxing, you're only as good as your last fight. And he set the bar so high, we're talking about Custio Clayton, Samurai, what he did, he did all these great or early knockouts. And then when he all of a sudden when he goes the distance with someone that you might not know, someone who's fighting a very negative fight, oh, he's washed up now, you know.
Right. Yeah. And I don't agree with that at all. I think the only thing really that I would have liked to have seen, because I think there's just guys, this guy Karen or a guy like Sandor Martin, like there's just super mobile guys that you're not always going to look great against. So I think this
Yeah.
guy's kind of one of those guys. I just wanted to see more speed from him. I felt like he was trying to wind up with everything. And the thing that's always been special to me about him is how fast and explosive he is. And I felt like he was trying too hard to muscle this guy, and I think if he had just changed speeds a little, I think he could have made it easier for him. Obviously, he dominated every second of the fight, but
Yeah, no, you're right. And that's the thing. People forget. Yeah, he's fought 30 times. He's only 25 years old. He's got a lot,
I don't
still
even
to
think
learn.
I realized that, bro. He's 25.
Yeah, he's 25 years old.
People got to chill with the criticism.
Yeah, and I think that it would be great if he was to stay more active, because I know last year he fought only once. It would be great if he could stay active. Back in the day, this wasn't an issue because he had, you could fight in different markets, and you could get a few fights. I remember James Toney, right after he won the middleweight title, he was back in the ring the next month. So it would be nice if that was the case. Stay active while waiting for another like one of the big fights. I hope that what they don't do is stick around and wait around and hope for, oh, see what the IBF says about, getting the Spence fight made. I hope that he, goes out there and does his thing, and almost like a politician campaigning, make different campaign stops. Not every fight has to be a big fight, but just go be in front of an audience frequently and make his case and say, listen, hey, I want these big fights. I'm fighting these guys because no one else is going to fight me.
Right. And I think staying out of the ring and waiting, it doesn't increase the public's interest in the matchups. It's like, I think a lot of times fans forget, like for me, like just the fact that we've seen Keith Thurman fight, I don't know, 2 times in the last 5 years. I think Keith is a great fighter, but I'm losing interest in seeing matchups of his because he's inactive. So I would hate for young fighters to do that to themselves.
Yeah, like 2014, Keith Thurman's like, oh my goodness, Keith Thurman, he's gonna kill everyone. And now it's like 2023, people go, oh yeah, Keith Thurman, yeah. Oh,
Right.
I remember him, yeah, I don't know if he's gonna fight that guy, but yeah, I remember him,
I'd love to
he,
see it. That's what people say about Keith. I'd love to see it.
yeah. Like when I see Keith Thurman training on like Instagram, I'm like, what is he training for? Like he got a fight coming up or something. Like, it would be great to see him in the ring. But I think he was a guy who, he got that, he wanted to just get to that level and he got that fight. And I don't see the hunger in him anymore. But I remember him coming out of the Olympic trials. I remember 'cause I used to live in Florida, and he used to be promoted locally in that Clearwater area. And I remember telling him, this guy's gonna be special. I think after like his first or second fight, I wrote like a profile on him for a Boxing Digest. I don't know if it ever got published, because whatever. I had that magazine had a lot of problems. If ever there was a magazine that had to stop, it was that magazine. But yeah, no, that was that like I remember seeing him early on, and he really, I think he had a couple injuries. Obviously, every puncher has hand injuries, but he was such an exciting fighter, and he just had that thing. But one of the interesting things is like it's almost like, because I'm a big wrestling fan too, so like I'll see like in different markets, different like fighters will like get different crowd reactions, And I don't know what it is, but for some reason, like Keith Thurman, like the Brooklyn Barclays crowd just loves to boo him. I don't know what it is, but I
I
always think,
noticed that, bro. Even in fights where he would win, he'd be giving a speech after the fight, and people would be booing him, and it would be like, "Damn, bro, let Keith have a moment, bro."
they treat him like as if he's the one who just tripped Kevin Durant and like got him out for a month. I don't know what it is, but like I mean I was at one fight where uh Keith Thurman was walking through the like after the show he was walking ringside and some drunk fans were like trying to fight him from like and Keith will stay there and engage like but yeah, no, I don't know what it is. That's the one thing I still kind of enjoy. Yeah, I'd like to go to more Barclay shows just to see Keith Thurman argue with fans.
Bro, I went to a couple of those early PBC Barclays Center shows, and I think they did a great job with them. I wish they would do them more often. Um, how'd you score Via versus Speedy Ellis?
You know what? Here's the thing. I thought that Ellis won the fight. If you were just going on like the points, the rounds, right? I thought that he had enough rounds in the bank, and but um this other gentleman he first off every time a guy comes from another country and Samson Lukowitz is with him you're in tough because Samson's a great talent scout if nothing else. So he knew exactly what this guy was about when he came to fight Rashidi Ellis. And we saw, with Rashidi Ellis, he has a lot to work on. He was not sitting down on his punches. And when you do all that work to win rounds and you're not actually breaking a guy down, you're going to have problems later on in the fight. And that's what happened in the 12th round when he got dropped twice. I thought Rashidi Ellis won the fight, right? I think if they do a rematch, I'm blowing a blank on the other guy's name, but I think that guy actually
Roymond Villa.
was that.
Roymond Villa.
Yeah, Villa. Yeah, if they do a rematch, I think Villa beats him earlier. I think he actually stops him because that kind of style of a guy who throws fast punches but doesn't really sit down his punches, that's going to be a problem, because you can't you at that level. I don't really think you can make that adjustment. I think that he is who he is, and I think that we've seen. I think it's unfortunate because that would have been the perfect opponent for Boots Ennis to fight next, right? While he's staying busy. It's like a lower threat, level, and someone who has a lot of experience. And unfortunately, that doesn't look viable now. But yeah, I thought that if I'm just scoring the rounds, I thought that Rashidi Ellis, it's not a street fight. It's not whoever was strongest at the end and they won the fight. It's scored by rounds, and Villa won. I thought gave up some of the early rounds just because of Ellis's speed.
Ellis's speed and his jab. His jab was really great. He was landing it a lot. I think it was disrupting Villa's rhythm, but as the fight went on, it's like he wasn't necessarily adding anything to that except for the quick little flashy combinations here and there. So I actually scored it for Villa by a couple of points, and I think the way you could see this fight kind of comes down to how you score the middle rounds, right? Like 6, 7, and 8. I thought Ellis won the first 5 clean, no problem. But I was looking at him because I scored it on BoxRec, and then I looked at the second part, and I had 6 through 10 for Ellis. So I thought that after the 5th round, Villa basically took over the fight, and in a lot of ways was just much more physical. But I think because it's a close fight like that, it really just comes down to how you score those middle rounds. If you preferred Ellis in 6 and 7, then you probably have him winning the fight.
Yeah, no, that's really the case. Like, they were. I'm not one of these absolutists that like, oh, I score this way, and no, there are swing rounds, and I think that you mentioned those middle rounds. There were swing rounds where Villa sort of got his feet underneath him, got more comfortable, and was taking a little bit more chances. Because the first few rounds, I'm like, oh my goodness, like, Ellis is treating this guy like a sparring partner, and then you started to see a change where Ellis started getting rocked, because he was blocking some of those shots early on, and then later on those same punches were landing,
And the
and
body
hurting
shots
him.
were you could tell started bothering him.
Yeah, exactly. So, Yeah, I thought it was a very I thought it was an interesting fight. It's almost like Tarver Jones won. People say, oh, Tarver got more of the flash in the fight, or more of the the bigger moments. But then you sit down and count the rounds, and you're like, oh, maybe Roy did win that fight. Um, I thought Rashidi won this fight. I don't think it went. I don't think it bodes well at all for his future. I don't. I think that's a big issue because he's got to figure out what he's going to do now because he has a loss now, and the book's out on him a bit. We've seen him push, and we know now what the issue is.
But I think that's the importance of the rematches. It was a really good fight. Like it was a fun fight for the fans. It was a close fight. And if he works on some things, improves some things, comes back and beats this guy clean, I mean, I think that speaks more to his character. You know what I mean? That he was able to kind of step back, retool, and go out and beat this guy. Cause I think he could beat him. I think if he stays a little more disciplined and either de-impacts the fight for longer or really tries to sit down on his shots now and then, I think he can definitely beat this guy. I just think he let the pressure and the volume kind of get to him.
I mean, I think the real issue also is like, staying busy for him because Rashidi's a guy who, he's had some issues with promotional and that really kills a fighter. I think being inactive also because I'm looking now, he fought before that in July and then he didn't fight for about 2 years before that. So that sort of stuff, really is not good for fighters' development, obviously, but, especially with his situation, like, I think that when you're not fighting enough, it kind of stunts your development. And guys don't show up on day one because I've worked with amateur boxers and I've worked with professional boxers, and there is a big difference, right? Like a seasoned professional boxer will really, in terms of the pacing, you don't see guys going out there and just throwing 100 punches in the first round of a 10-round fight. The pacing, the ability to make your shots count, sitting down your punches. I think that is something that is learned and developed. Like look at Andre Ward's first fight, and I remember in the professionals, like his first pro fight, I thought he looked like, what is that? Because he had this hybrid style of boxing and amateur professional. He was basically doing amateur boxing in the professionals. You can't really do that. But I think that that's also an issue. You have to stay active. Yeah, now this is a guy with about 2 dozen fights, but you still need those fights to work on the things you're working on. And I think that him missing that time might have actually hurt his development too, because I mean I remember Rashidi Ellis hearing about him from the amateurs and that he was this really top prospect to look at, and I thought he was going to be one of these dark horses for a championship run. And now I think like you said, he has to go back, but it's very specific things, very specific things he has to work on, like sitting down his punches, not going straight back, in the corners. Those certain things that he has to work on. If he gets those things figured out, or kind of like uses pivots and slow it down a little bit, maybe hold off something for the later rounds. Yeah, I think he could develop into a fighter like that. But at a certain point, a guy kind of becomes who they are.
Yeah, and he missed those 2 years like out of the middle of his prime. You know what I'm saying? But I think a rematch with Villa would be cool. I think a rematch with Alexis Rocha. Rocha's been on a nice winning streak. Obviously, Speedy won the first one. I think that could be a fight that's beneficial to both of them.
Yeah, and also like let's not overlook the fact, and just for this fact alone, he's worth being redeemed. He has the best nickname in boxing, Speedy Rashidi Ellis. Come on, it works. He needs, he
Rolls
needs to
right
be
off the
more.
tongue.
He needs to be, turn your punches over, Rashidi next though.
Yeah, yeah. How did you feel about Boo Boo Andrade's win over Damon Nicholson?
It's like one of those.
Kind of a typical Boo Boo fight, right? With the early knockdown, and then he starts boxing.
I think it's more typical in the fact that like I was, oh, Boo Boo's fighting. Oh, okay, that's nice. Like on like a random card, like it was it's kind of weird because Boo Boo has all the ability, and I don't know if he just doesn't want more, like is this I remember when he won the USA championships, no, USA, the world championships. And I think he was like the first American forever to actually do that. Like he's a real talent, right? This is a guy who could do so much. Like he's
I think he still could.
he still could. Like if you like, if someone said, "Listen, I don't care what's going on. You're going to take this fight," and he'll go out there and probably beat whoever's the top guy on any given night. I don't know that he knows how to man or how to promote himself really. Like when I've tried to talk to him like a few times, like he's sort of just like seems like, hey, whatever's gonna happen is gonna happen. But because his personality is not the kind of guy to go out there and like, oh, I want to take this fight, I want that fight, and you know, this, I'm gonna force this. Like his he doesn't have the most appealing style, sometimes. He's the kind of guy that like you can't be a star winning 7 rounds. You have to dominate. People want to see domination. Doesn't matter if you just get by. Only Oscar De La Hoya could do that. But I mean, like you need to be a dominant champion in order to get people's attention if you don't already have it. So he's never really been able to do that either with his style or his mouth. I think that giving up his title, really was discrediting in a lot of people's eyes. It showed that he wasn't as serious, about the sport, because there's like the sport of just going out there and I'll fight every 6 months, whatever. But um, people want to see actually involved in like the competitive, nature of the sport and taking on all challengers. And I think that kind of hurt him a bit. But hey, if he could redeem himself by, fighting one of the Charlo brothers, and if he, on any given night he could beat them, like that's what's crazy about it. He doesn't see like oh, like it's one of those things like, oh, Demetrius Andre's fighting. Oh, what a weird thing, like that's
He's
interesting.
at the bottom of the card, man. I mean, he's in his mid 30s. He's been around forever. I think hardcore fans are like, all right, let's see Boo Boo in a big fight already before it's too late. You know what I'm saying? I think it's a frustrating thing to see a guy just kind of stay in the same lane for so long and not really know why he's not getting the big fights or not or why he's being avoided. Because there's guys that are avoided, but there's only so long that Canelo could avoid Golovkin. Like there comes a time where the fans demand the fight. I just don't think the fans have ever demanded that he be in with, a guy.
Yeah, no, and I think that's why we've seen him not really being there with a guy. So it's like that, and also like he went through his whole entire matchroom career and didn't really fight anyone that anyone could remember. So I mean, I think that's a little insane. At a certain point you got to make noise. Like if you're not making noise with your fist, you're not making noise with your mouth, and what does it matter, right? So like he kind of fell into a pattern of what Gerwin and Haas, had gone through as like when he was a 115-pound champion, where he was just, here's Gerwin on it became filler for like another card, like we need to make this a triple header because of budget issues. All right, yeah, triple header. There we go. Throw German and Kyle's fight. Yeah, throw Boo Boo Andrade in there too. Like it's sort of like that. So um people lose it. It's almost like imagine like you have a TV show and then like you're building towards this one big thing or whatever, the Sopranos, for instance. I'm a big Sopranos fan, shout out to New Jersey. Imagine they have like the whole thing and then like they get to the last episode and then like they're at the diner and then they get their bill and then they leave and what, like you want to see something happen, right? It's like, and yeah, we're just gonna go to the store now. If there's no conclusion, if it doesn't build to anything, like what did we watch all those fights? Why did we buy those tickets to
Right.
see this fight? Like we bought a ticket to be part of a journey, and this journey doesn't seem to be going anywhere.
I guess where I get frustrated for him is it's just like you're right. I don't think his style, you know, creates demand to see him from the fans. And I also don't think that he's like a big talker. He's good on the mic, but he's not wild like that. You know what I mean? He's like a normal.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, and also like it's funny because like I've known Andre for a long time. Like I remember he used to come down to New Jersey a lot and spar, right? And you get a lot of work with like guys like Kendall Holt and stuff. And I would see him in the gyms, and he's always been a dedicated, super serious fighter. I think he has the ability to beat anyone on any given night, right? It's like, but if people don't want to see you do the fights, then it's like, what do you have going on then, right? It's like, and he doesn't, and when he does fight, like the guys, like the guys, who are overmatched doesn't actually, entertain. So that's sort of the issue.
And I guess the part that I get frustrated for him is that there isn't any mechanism in boxing that like mandates that he get a big fight just from winning and from beating the guys they put in front of him. I mean, I can't even remember the last time I saw the guy lose a round. So it's,
Yeah,
I feel like on some level, just him being really good should get rewarded. And I feel like it kind of sucks that it doesn't.
I'm trying to think if Jason Quigley was able to get around. No, I don't think so.
Definitely not, dude. I mean, maybe Martirosian. I really, I genuinely,
Honest might have been the best guy he fought, actually, thinking about it.
him or Willie Nelson, maybe one of those guys.
Here's a guy I haven't thought about in a while. Willie Nelson, yeah. He was a good
Yeah.
fighter.
So I wanted to ask you this too, because I know you've been around the game for a minute. What's your favorite fighter, person, or story that you've gotten to cover or be involved in?
I mean, my favorite boxer growing up was Aaron Pryor, and to be able to meet Aaron Pryor and get to chop it up with him, like that was a huge thing for me because he was a big inspiration. I looked to his story a lot as a kid as like inspiration for me because he was another guy, and had a kind of crazy childhood and found his identity through boxing. So me getting to meet him. I mean, I have a lot of funny stories, because I got to cover almost everyone. I was around Pacquiao for about a decade. Um who else? I remember when I was 19 years old, or 20, I was covering the Mayweather De La Hoya press conference at Waldorf Astoria, and I was at the other end of the table, and no one knew me. I was like a I was writing for Boxing Scene at that time, and then I started trying to shout my question, "Hey!" And the guy was like, "Oh, come on down closer," and like actually, because I Mayweather couldn't hear my question, so Mayweather had me stand next to him and ask the question. I was like 19 years old. I was like, and that was the first time I think anyone ever did a story about like Mayweather Pacquiao, and this the fight wouldn't happen for another decade or so. Let me see here. I mean, getting to cover Pacquiao, that usually meant like going wherever he was, and he liked to play basketball late at night, And I remember I got after he played like two full court or more than two full, like maybe like three full court games, like near midnight, at some gym. I got to interview him, and then like, he's sitting there in the locker room, and he likes to like comb his hair and everything, looking in the mirror, and he's like kind of like looking at himself in the mirror and he doesn't realize that I'm there in the back. And he makes a face like like a mean face, and then Manny Pacquiao making a mean face at the mirror, after playing basketball, and then he turns around and notices me, and he's like, "Oh, hey, come on, let's do an interview." And yeah, just I got to be around a lot of guys. It's interesting, I mean, I've met a lot of the fighters that I grew up as a fan of. That was I get more excited to meet trainers and old fighters. I don't, I mean, like I'm just working with these young guys, like who are some of these guys? I think the younger, like when I bring my boxers around, like the amateurs, they get excited because they're like big boxing fans. And they get to meet them. I'm like, and like for me, it's like I'm just working, you know what I mean? But then I'm like Jean-Pierre Valencia, he was so excited to meet Boots Ennis. Like he told me, "Wow, I remember when I was living in Spain, I used to dream of getting to meet him. I never thought I got to meet him, and now I got to meet him." And I'm like, "Yeah, yeah." And like, and me, I'm thinking to myself, "Oh man, I'm gonna be up to 4 in the morning transcribing this interview, and this is gonna suck, and I'm not gonna sleep, and I gotta drive in the morning." You know what I mean? I'm thinking like that, whereas like I don't really get excited to meet the young fighters as much. I mean, there are a lot of interesting stories, and I like when I'm able to get ahead of a story. And I like to cover the local guys in New Jersey. I like to tell their stories because I don't think anyone's telling their stories. Um, I really like that part of it, like giving press to fighters that no one would really know about. But because it's like sort of like it's like you go to a museum and you see a painting of a person from the 1700s. You don't know who this person is, but you assume this person must have been someone special if someone took the time to paint their portrait. It takes time. And I think it's the same thing with writing. Like I, I'll admit, I like making someone feel like that they're getting punched in the face. Their sacrifices are not in vain, whether or not they become a champion or not. Sometimes I get lucky and they do become like someone special. A couple of times that's happened, but I really just I love the sport. I live it, 24/7. I mean, I got to say that I've been around Freddie Roach. I've been around Buddy McGirt. I talked to Buddy the other day actually. I've been around Emmanuel Stewart. I've been around all these great coaches and got to talk about the sport and break it down and just keep these stories alive, keep the passion of the sport alive because sometimes the people who are in charge of the sport don't do a great job, with that stuff. But for me, it's like, I've been doing this since I was 19 years old. I'm 35 now. I would say that those were 16 years well spent.
Well, Ryan, before I let you go, if you had to be, if you could pick any matchup in all of boxing to get made for 2023, what would be like your fantasy matchup? All politics bullshit aside, your fantasy matchup.
I think seeing that fine gentleman Spence Crawford finally get active would be great. I know a lot of people want to see
Do you
Spence
think
Crawford.
it'll happen? Do you think it'll actually happen?
No, but you said, hey, no bullshit, right?
Damn.
So, I'm going by your rules. You made the rules. That would be great. Fury, Usyk, that's another one of those fights. I don't know if it'll be exciting. I don't know if it'll be interesting. I want to see what happens, right? I'm just curious.
I'm dying to see that one.
That would be great. I think that, you got to kind of make that in the UK, for legal reasons, but that would have been a great fight to put in like the Garden, because the Garden was the place where you could put a random heavyweight championship fight, and because it's the heavyweight championship, everyone would come out to see it. I think we're not going to see it in the Garden, obviously, but I would love to see that. Spence Crawford, yeah, would be great. Better BF Bivol. I think that would be another interesting matchup. I'd like to see that just for them because they deserve to, get to another level. Yeah, I
I'm
think
really
that
hoping we get Haney versus Lomachenko, bro. That's a fight I would love to see.
I think we'll see that fight. I think that we will see that fight. I would honestly, it's too bad that Ryan Garcia left the 135 division, but I would have liked to have seen Haney and Garcia as professional. I know they fought like a million times as amateurs. I thought that would have been an interesting matchup just because like Ryan Garcia, people, they say what they say about him. He's an Instagram boxer and all that's true, but he's also a pretty good boxer in the ring too.
He also has a
Um,
deep amateur career. He's not a guy like a Jake Paul who took boxing up at 20.
he's like if Jake Paul was a serious fighter. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like he's actually a serious fighter. He's got, like he understands the game. I think that you look at him on Instagram and social media, and he, might get a different vibe from him, but he's a real fighter. Um, yeah, I think those are big fights. I think that when the people you want to see fight actually get in there and fight, it's good for the sport. And when you don't see that, and when what people no one cares about boxing because no one knows who the guys are, like Ray Leonard and Tommy Hearns, they fought, when in their prime, like they that was the toughest fight that Ray Leonard could have fought, and he went out there and fought. That's why people like look at him as a great fighter. So if being a great fighter doesn't matter to you and it's all about just collecting checks and cool, but don't get mad when people
Right. Don't get mad when the
respect the
fans
game.
start to tune you out and lose interest. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
exactly.
Because at the end of the day, it's ultimately the biggest checks are going to come from the biggest fights. And hopefully at some point, the fighters and everyone else involved in the matchmaking can see that.
Yeah, the thing is like the biggest checks, but the other, checks aren't bad too, that's the thing. So, there's
But I've always said though, right? If it's exclusively about getting a fat check, the good fights are what are going to get you that.
Yeah, yeah, but then like I remember dealing with the whole Pacquiao Mayweather thing, and the thing was that people dug in on partisan levels, like, oh, who's to blame, but both guys are making a lot of money fighting guys who weren't Manny Pacquiao or Floyd Mayweather. So that was the thing. There was still this money to make, and then when there wasn't this money to make, then they're like, hey, whatever, let's go cash out. So I mean, maybe Terrence Crawford thinks there's more money in that BLK prime than getting that Errol Spence fight. But to me, I like even with my amateurs, the way I put it in their heads, these are the guys. Everyone's got a target on your back now. You're a champion, but these are the guys. These are the guys who are getting all the awards, all the acclaim. They're getting invited to like the big training camps for the nationals and stuff like that. And that you want to go to that next level. You want to be like, because boxing's a high. You fight, you win. The high lasts for a little bit, but then you need the high again, right? It's not like, oh, I won my last fight. Well, your last fight was 2 months ago, right? So, like, that's the way it is, right? My thinking is that in the professionals, you should want to be, I was the guy who beat Errol Spence. Yeah, I was the guy who beat Terrence Crawford. You should want to be that guy because that lasts forever, right? The money comes and goes, but that lasts forever. So, I mean, for me, that's a fight that needs to happen. It needs to happen now because these guys are getting old, and you know, I don't want to see a Pacquiao Mayweather situation where that fight should have happened years earlier, and then it really didn't live up to what it should have been. It became grumpy old men.
Well, Ryan, I really appreciate your time, brother. Is there anybody, anything, anywhere that you want to shout out before we wrap this up?
You know what? I just want to say always thanks to all the boxing fans. They have given me this opportunity to, like if no one read my stories, I wouldn't, be working. So I appreciate that. And just keep the sport alive, right? On every level. Like there are people who live, eat, breathe everything boxing, and I'm one of those guys. I'm going to be involved in the sport, until the day I die, whether I'm writing or training amateurs. Like people think it's crazy. Like, Ryan, you're training amateurs, like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, that's what I like. It's I like to sit there and, like, hold the pads for kids and teach them how to throw a punch, and the excitement of bringing guys to their first fights, and all those things. That's, to me, I love the sport far more than I love the business, right? So to the people who actually love the sport and do the stuff to keep it going, all respect to them. And Dakota, thank you for having me on. Yeah, we gotta catch up. We gotta get a Cuban sandwich over in Bergenland sometime.
Absolutely, bro. Let's make that happen soon. All right.
All right, take it easy, man.
Peace, brother.